Is this thing on? Hey, it is on. I don't have to yell. Again, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing all the food. Thank you so much to Stephen for organizing us and 12 emails, getting a whole bunch of food out here. It's great. You're all going to have to go back for seconds or thirds, though, because there's a lot of food left. So keep going. Yeah, great spread. Thanks, everybody. We have a lot of wonderful show and tell stuff to go through here. And even at 5 minutes apiece, it's going to take about an hour and a half. So we are going to get started. So let me turn it over to our show and tell Master Ceremonies AE4R, Mike Stussy.
Ahoy, ahoy. Okay, Dean, thank you. And thanks to everybody that has come to our holiday party, and especially to those of you who brought stuff to show. Let's see, I have a little bit of a script here. Okay, this better? Okay, for those of you who brought stuff to show and tell about, please be ready in your turn. You remember this thing I sent out on email that listed the presenters? Well, I'm going to call you in this order. For those that just brought stuff and are here to show, I'll call you after the last one on this list. And we'll try to fit you all in. So please speak loudly like I am. And also, please, no more than 5 minutes. If you can possibly save a little on that time, then that'd be great, because we have a lot of stuff here. And for the audience, we have a great show for you. Please, no side conversations. No side conversations, please. And while you're not conversing with your neighbors, please go back for thirds or fourths. And then hold your questions until the end, if you would. Then, of course, big applause for the presenters. Okay, first up is going to be Don, KM4 UDX.
So, everybody else here, this is a great start. Everybody else here is going to show you their extraordinary success stories. Everything here works and is finely crafted, unbelievably well executed. Some of us are on the other side of that. There is in amateur radio, if you're a maker, a notion of a shelf of shame. And it's where you put the things that you thought you would start, projects that didn't work out, stuff that got crushed under the reality of too much time and not enough talent. And so I have brought some items on my shelf of shame. And the great thing is that most people that are building and creating and tweaking can relate to that. So I'd like to think that I'm going to share with you the other half of all these successes. How did people get here? So I have a few examples. Over here to my right is a beautiful maker's project, a radio that Dean's going to show you. Dean has led a lot of members in our club into building similar radios. Here's one. This was called a direct conversion receiver, a brilliant little project. It's got an Arduino controlling the display and a frequency synthesizer thingy and a bunch of other modules. Does it work? No, I haven't finished it. This is an end-fed half-wave. All the rage these days, end-fed half-wave transformer. Brilliant. Does it work? No. Everybody who wants to go to the park has to have a power source. You need your Go box with your battery juice in it. So here's my box. Here are my lithium-ion cells. These babies will dump 100 amps in a microsecond. I don't need that. I'm just going to power a radio. But they can do some serious energy distribution. So I have 4 of them. Combine that 4 times 4 is 16, so it'll do 16 volts. This is a battery management system, the BMS, that charges them, that keeps them from being overly discharged and balances them. This is $1.50. If you put them together, you have a battery management system. Does that work? No. Here I have a radio I built for POTA. Does it work? No. This thing I built to do, it's a dummy load and an SWR power meter. Does it work? No. But the reason why I ask is if anybody has NE 1N5711, 1N5711, I need a couple. All right. Maybe I can get this working. So thank you so much. This is my wall of shame. I'm happy to share my embarrassment with you. And the last thing is this little garish thing here. Yes, this allows me to communicate. It's a biohack that allows me to communicate directly with Elon Musk. We also used it at the Halloween parade because it was a good focal point for kids and they got to play with it afterwards. Thank you, Vienna Wireless. Sometimes not. Thank you.
Next up, Leon.
Thank you. That's a tough act to follow. So what I brought to show and tell tonight is my Parks on the Air setup, my little QRP setup. And one of the things I want to emphasize with what I brought tonight is that most everything that I have in this little rig is homebrew. So I'll start out with something that isn't homebrew, but when I go out, and Mike Minotti and I often go out to a park, this is a 10-meter telescoping mast that I can stick into the ground, and then with this I attach my antennas. There's a little piece of string super glued to the end of the antenna, and then this is, as Don was talking about, an end-fed half-wave antenna cut for 20 meters. So hang on, I'm about to get there. I'm about to say, unlike Don's antenna, this works really well. So I attach the wire to the mast and run it up, and it operates well as a 20-meter vertical, and I also have a link in it so that it tunes on 15 meters as well. I also, if I want to operate on 40, I have end-fed half-waves. Both of these work really well with 40-meter length wires on them. The radios that I'm using here are QRP Labs kits. These are the mini QCX kits. They're CW only. They're monobanders. This one is set up for 20 meters. This one here operates on 40, so I can use the antennas here. I have a little Home-brew 3D printed Morse code key that I use with the radio. And if I don't have access to a picnic table, I'll use this little chair, and then I 3D printed this little knee pad that attaches to my knee here like this. I put the radio on it, and I keep my log with a pen and piece of paper. Usual headphones, battery, and other stuff here. So anyway, that's the quick tour of my little portable, mostly homebrew Parks on the Air setup. So. And it all works.
Thanks, Leon. That was wonderful. Oh, now, Howard, K0LKD.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Another tough act to follow. I've got similar but smaller QRP kit, HF-wise. In contrast to his stuff, most of it is commercial, but it utilizes a KX2 or a KX3. I've got an external battery. There's one built in. I've got a couple of end-fed wires, antenna-wise. One of them is one that Leon made for me, and this thing puts out about 10 watts, 5 watts on QRP, and I also use a biennial battery for longer term operations. So the idea was to put everything in this bag that I need to do Parks on the Air or go out or whatever. So that was the objective. I think it works. This is a built-in antenna, the Hallicrafters. I mean, it's not built in, it's another antenna, so I've got a choice of several antennas if I want to use them. So in a nutshell, that's basically it. I try to cram as much stuff in here as possible, and then I'm fairly self-sufficient. So it's limited to QRP, 5 watts, but that works in a lot of cases. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Howard. You should see his truck. Kevin, N4KL. A couple of things to show us.
Okay, a couple of things. Went to Dayton last year, spent all my money. So the next week I went to the Howard County Hamfest, didn't have any money. And I was just poking around, and I found a Olenko HT, and the guy was asking $15 for it. And as soon as I picked it up, he says, "I'll take 10." So I put a new battery on it, perfectly working, good HT. Go to Berryville. I've got that HT on my belt with a new battery. I see this, $5. Couldn't turn it down, put the battery on there, works fine. So got 2 HTs for $15. And when we put the repeater up, I'm out in Haymarket. It's a little harder to hear. So I found a radio that did crossband repeat, but I wanted something to carry around, not my big HT, when I was going for a walk or just messing around the yard or something. And I got this little family radio service radio for $15, 2 for $30. Converted it down to 440, and it works just fine. As a matter of fact, I've got my crossband repeater in the truck right now. Let's see if we can bring it up. Okay, so we're transmitting on the FRS radio, which we've converted over to 440, out to the truck, up to the K4HTA repeater, and back. So pretty neat way to use crossband repeat. And the last thing is you'll see a lot of these at Hamfest. It's a Motorola HT1000. You can pick them up for almost nothing. You have to be careful which one you get, though, because the serial number will tell you if it'll work on 2 or 440 or 800 megahertz. Some of them won't work in the ham band, some will. But the problem is getting them frequencied up. Well, it's about $18 to get that done, but I got a friend who does it for free. So, but you can also use it as a weapon if you have to. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Kevin. Terrific. Mike, WA8AHZ. You want it back there?
So in 2018, I came up here and I was just come back to the hobby, and I was so excited because I had like 300 contacts, but I needed a way to show them on a map because I was trying to figure out how my antenna was working. And so maybe we'll have a screen presentation of my show and tell from 2018. But let me just bring forward. So now I have 16,000 contacts 4 years later. And my little software application I wrote would only let me put up to 5,000 contacts. And so I had a problem. I needed to find a new application. I found a new application that allowed me to put an unlimited number of contacts. Oh, there we go. There it is. It's not very big, but you can see the United States is mostly colored in. In each of those little squares called grid squares, I can put my little mouse over the grid square and I can see who I've talked to in that grid square. So for example, down at the bottom, I've talked to somebody in Antarctica, and that's the Antarctica station. So not only can I do this from the little bit of United States, but I can do this across the across the world. And I can see I have contacts. Maybe imagine if you look where Japan is, that's colored in. If you look at the eastern part of Australia, you can see that I have contacts there. I did this because I wanted to see where my antenna would shoot my radio waves to. That's my presentation. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mike. Very impressive. Okay, who's the next on my list here, David? Okay, it is Dean, our beloved and esteemed president.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. So I think most of you know that several of us have been working with the high school students at Thomas Jefferson Science and Technology Magnet. And if you hadn't heard, we got 36 of them with their amateur radio licenses 3 weeks ago. 36 new high school students. So Leon, Mike, and I, and then Bill Mara, who's not here tonight, have been working with the students. In the spring, among other things, we're going to build a direct conversion receiver with them, and it's just 4 boards. It's an oscillator, you got to tune. It's an amplifier, you got to be able to hear it. It's a mixer, you got to be able to mix up the RF and the IF, and it's a filter. 4 boards, and it's for 40 meters, all analog, 5 transistors, and this is the Thomas Jefferson High School direct conversion receiver. And if all goes well, Mike helped me put up an antenna here. We'll see if we can hear it. 9-volt battery. So there you go. That's it. And you can build one. Believe me, we're going to have the high school kids build. If you want to build one, you can.
Terrific, Dean. Thank you. All right. Ron, WA6YOU, Mr. Connector.
All right, thanks. In 1989, I went on a de-expedition to the Kalahari Desert in Botswana. And we took a couple of ICOM 735s with us, but we figured we needed an emergency radio. So I found this in Canada. This is from Paracomm Corporation. 10 watts, upper sideband. You program it with a computer and a simple terminal program. It will do absolutely load into anything. It'll load into an infinite impedance. I mean, a wet noodle, this thing will work. So I made this little connector thing here so I can put it on an actual dipole. I use this on the 60 meter band. It's 10 watts, PEP, works like $1,000,000, and powered by D-cells. So the frequency we put in here for the Kalahari Desert was the emergency Kalahari Desert frequency of 6.998 megahertz. I then hooked it up to the 60 meter band, so I have all 5 frequencies in here for the 60 meter band. They say if you're going to use this in the Arctic, this is also for the Arctic, as an emergency radio, take the batteries and either put them with your dog sled next to the dogs, or put the batteries in your pocket to keep them warm. The batteries seem to last forever. They really do a good job. And by the way, yes, it works. $2,800 Canadian dollars, 2,800 Canadian dollars. And I called them last week to see if they had a program and some data for me, and of course it's all in French. The office is in Montreal. But I highly recommend this for a nice emergency radio. That's all I got, Mike.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, we're moving right along. Matt, KO4KHC.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Matt, KO4KHC. This will be short because all I have is this old Hallicrafters radio. It's a receive only, and it is a model SX-110. Story is that my next door neighbor knew I was getting into ham radio and studying for it, and he was like, oh, and he grew up in the house next to me. He was like, oh, my dad and I used to have a radio up in the attic, and we threw an antenna out into the trees. We used to run up there and hide from Mom when she was mad at us. So we used to listen to it all the time, I guess. So, but bottom line is he dug it up out of his attic and he gave it to me, and it hasn't run. He hasn't turned it on in 30 or 40 years. So I plugged it in. The light comes on. That's all I've done with it. I don't even know where the antenna screws into the back. There's like multiple places where things go, but it's not very well labeled. So if anybody knows anything about these, I'd be curious to know what plugs into what. So, but that's all I got. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you. By the way, the man to talk to about the SX110 is Dennis, W4ZOR. He's got a stack of them. Anyway. Okay, next up, Mike, KD4MM. Captain Mike, go ahead, sir.
All right, good evening. Thank you. This will be another counterpoint to Don's presentation, i.e. something that works. Where's Don? Sorry. So a year or so ago, Dean had us in the Makers Group build a 5-watt transceiver, and I'd never worked at anything less than 100 watts, so I thought, how good can this be? And I was surprised at how far you can reach around the world with 5 watts. So I got intrigued and interested in buying something or getting something that was a little bit more finished and portable than my plywood 5-watt radio. So I ran across this thing. This is called uSDX. It's actually TR-uSDX, and it's a 5-watt. It's like in a stack of cards, the size of the thing, but it's a 5-watt radio, 5-band, 80, 60, 40, 30, and 20. It's got full cat control. It does CW, sideband, and digital modes, and runs off of a battery, anything from 5 to 15 watts or 15 volts. So it works really well. I've used it. So the antenna I use with this thing is the one Dean used. It's out. I threw it up in the tree out there. So and it's my end-fed radio or antenna. It actually fits in my pocket. So I decided to put all this stuff in a case because with the radio, I also built a little battery pack. This is just some 18650 cells in a 3D printed box with a BMS, and that'll run me for 6 hours with this radio. And I also have a little speaker, portable speaker, because sometimes the speaker in this thing is not the best. So, and it's got a whole lot of. It's got a menu selection system of about 20 things. You can select bandwidth. It allows you to do split rig. It's a pretty powerful little radio, and it's an SDR radio, and it's got a little LCD screen on it. So, it's about $100 if you want to try to build it, as Don did. Or for another $50, you can get one already made. Okay? And I think that's it. And any questions? I'm going to hook it up later to the antenna over there if you want to try it out. So, all right, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next up, Scott, KD4EBL.
Well, as some of you may or may not know, I love old radios. I love even better old radios that are given to me for free. So what we have here is a realistic Tandy 150, and this came to me and it was completely dead. And basically, I just recapped it and went through it, cleaned all the things up, and got it right back to work. I've aligned it a couple of times. It doesn't always keep that well because it's a Radio Shack. But had a lot of fun with this. This was very similar to one of the first radios I had, and so it kind of needs a lot. And right now I keep in the garage, and so I can listen to ball games and whatnot on it. But keeping in mind, since I have 2 seconds left, on the table back there is a whole bunch of free stuff. It's going to go into the dumpster after today, so if you see something there or many things there, please feel free to take them home.
Bravo, Scott. Resurrecting an old radio. What a noble thing. Okay, David, W4DOE is next. So during the summer, I decided to build a QDX. This is a QRP Labs 5-watt FSK only transceiver, and it interfaces directly with a computer, and it mainly runs, FT8, W8, FJTX, FT8, FT4, and with FLDigi you can get PSK31 and any FSK mode. So I also built a small 3 or 4 state antenna tuner, and decided to bring this all outside for portable operations. But there's a lot of cables to hook up, and I just felt it was more or less inconvenient to take all this stuff out in the bag, hook it all up. So I built I got a transit case from the Harbor Freight, and I built a tray out of wood and aluminum angle. And I put everything in the box and hooked it all up so that all I needed to connect was an antenna and my computer, which connects to the UDX by a USB cable. So in this box, so I put, I don't know whether you guys can see it or not, but here's the QDX, and this is a QRP SWR power beater. There's this 4 states antenna tuner. This is a buck converter. I found out that I could use the 9 volts rather than 12 volts to power up the QDX because it was more efficient. I could get more power out of it. It's only 5 watts, so I could squeeze a little bit more out. And I put it together with a battery monitor and this gigantic 12 amp hour battery. So I can run probably a couple of days on this battery, and the only limiting factor is the battery in the laptop. But and also I've been experimenting with the GPS for the laptop, which works pretty well. And so I could just lift the tray up, put it in the transit box, and then put this cover on it, and put the computer on the top, close it all up, and I've got a very easily portable system. So that's all I have.
That may be all, but it's pretty great. Thank you. Lee, KD4RE, our master engineer.
So you've all been hearing about our makers group, and back last year, the goal was to build what Dean calls a simple single-sideband. So it's a 40 meter single sideband transceiver, and I of course twiddled and didn't quite follow the exact scheme that everybody else was doing, but the IF is the same, and we use Dean software in it and all that with the mixer. But my driver stage is my own creation, and the output amplifier is actually a 10-watt amplifier. But my driver only puts out about 600 milliwatts. I'm only getting 5 watts out of it. So anyway, I brought in, this is the my packaged version rather than being on a piece of plywood of the 40 meter transceiver. Have made over 100 QSOs with this thing, particularly about a year ago. And yes, we've worked Europe, we've worked Italy and Spain and a few other places running 5 watts. So you can work DX on 5 watts. But just, it is pretty simple, really. And we kind of launched into something probably more complicated that we started with than what we built last year, the direct conversion receiver. But we want to try and encourage people to come in and join us with the Makers Group. And because it's a lot of fun to actually get on the air with something that you built. It goes back to the real spirit of amateur radio, be it back from the 1930s and 20s when everybody built their own transmitter. And today, with the solid-state electronics, again, running the Arduino with a frequency synthesizer chip, it's not that hard to generate the frequencies you need. And I think it's kind of amazing when you talk to people and you tell them you're running a radio that you built by yourself from scratch. It just kind of fascinates people. They don't really expect people to do that anymore. So that's what I brought in to show. As I said, the amplifier is kind of a knockoff of a QRP Labs design that I used. It uses a pair of IR510s, but the only stage in here that's limiting my power is actually my driver, and the one I have in here already runs pretty warm. So anyway, so that's what, you know. So a final plug for Dean's group, you know, join us every other Wednesday, the second and fourth Wednesdays on our Zoom sessions. And like Don has been trying to do, Mike has successfully done, Dean has successfully done, we're building radios that really work. You get on the air and you can use them.
Thanks, Lee. Good show. All right. Next up will be Ruben, KM4 Hotel Zulu Foxtrot.
Right. Hi, I'm Ross. So when I operate, I'm strictly mobile. So I bought a new truck last year, and I decided I'm going to go nuts with this. I'm going to make all kinds of crazy stuff, and I'm going to make it perfect. So this is what I got done so far, the power distribution center that's going to bolt behind the back seat of my truck. So I fabricated this out of aluminum to fit in a weird spot behind the back seat, because unlike some people here, I don't have a King Ranch, which has the amplifier and the inverter behind the back seat, so I have room. The radio bolts to a bracket that bolts to these 4 bolts. I didn't bring that tonight, so I don't drop it. And so this is only part of the overall plan. This is going to control all the lighting, the radio, and the other equipment. I also built an aluminum console, a stainless folding antenna bracket, which is out in the parking lot bolted to my truck, and some other custom equipment. That's why I haven't been on the air, because I'm going nuts with it. And if you want to make the same one too, here's the wiring diagram.
Okay, good. Awesome. All right. He's the last name I have on here, but I know that Dennis, W4ZOR, brought something really cool or really old. Here you go.
My last assignment, I was in the Navy. I retired 24 years, Chief Petty Officer. I was a Russian linguist. I worked for the POW MIA office here in Crystal City. And I was doing all the field investigations in Hungary, because my parents escaped from Hungary in '56, came to America '57. I was blessed growing up speaking Hungarian, because my grandmother never learned more than 3 words I can't say here out on the in the cafeteria. But either way, my radio career and this came together rather nicely. June 30th, 1944, there were 4 B-24s were shot down just north of Lake Balaton in Hungary. And it was one of the cases I worked on. I had about 50 airmen who were never brought home from World War II. They were all aviators, because the only U.S. reach into Hungary was the bombing raids, of which my parents told me what it was like to have 1,000 bombers come over the city and bomb the hell out of everything. Every other classroom seat was empty. You know, every day there'd be another kid missing and whatnot. But on the other side, we had our young men up there. In this case, 1,000 bombers, about 11 guys on each bomber, about 11,000 souls up in, 10% will get knocked down. But just think about that, you know, and out of that, out of the 10% the aircraft shot down, a lot of them didn't make it home. But there was only about 50 in my research that were still in Hungary. And I was fortunate enough to bring 3 of the MIAs home. And this is one of the cases I worked on. It started with the field investigation. It was Martin Troy. He's 22 years old from Norwalk, Connecticut. Was a gunner on one of these 4 bombers. And he was the only one out of the 17 killed that day that never came home. And I got to know a bombardier who was on one of the bombers, and he bird dogged Congress. He'd write his congressman and went out of his way to just, it was his life mission to bring Martin home. And Martin did come home. And one of my friends, well, there was a Hungarian young man over there. His name was Nandor Mohos. My dad's name was Nandor. It's kind of weird. But he, since his childhood, he's probably in his 40s, a Nokia engineer. He knew where every single bomber hit and every fighter that hit the ground. And he was a very useful resource. Plus, his language skills were much better than mine. College educated. I knew kitchen Hungarian. And so it was an interesting mission for sure. So after I did the field investigation, they finally did the excavation. There's a video of it on YouTube. If you just type in Martin Troy, you can actually watch Jerry Conlon, who passed away last year. He was 95 or something. The bombardier, he's in there at the site when they actually recovered Martin. And Nandi was short for Nandor. He knew I was a big radio buff. He had visited my home here in Northern Virginia a couple of times. And he was invited by many of the bomber groups, veterans, to come and meet with people because he was such a valuable asset for the MIA and missions and old guys. One of them was Frank Lashinsky. He was on a bomber, got shot down in Hungary. It was March of '45. There was only 2 weeks left in the war. But he ended up going to Stalag Luft 7A where Schultz and those other guys on Hogan's Hero were hanging out. And he actually got to go home. We never recovered the one guy missing from his aircraft. But he went to Hungary, and he brought his wife. And he was actually brought home a piece of his airplane. It was a big section of wing a farmer used for a chicken coop. Still had the star painted on it. It was like a star. And he used to go to the VA to go help the old people. You know, he'd grab his airplane wing and go to the VA. Another guy, if you look up Frank Lashinsky, he's on YouTube too with his interviews of his experiences. But anyway, Nandi knew I was a radio buff, so he was there when they excavated Martin, brought him home. I mean, his whole remains were in very good condition. His flight jacket, you could wear it today because it was in a bog, and just an incredible amount of preservation. But Nandi mailed me the radio, one of the piece of radio equipment off the airplane. And the airplane was called the Misfortune. Think about that. So there's plenty of resources if you want to read further into it. I just quickly did a Martin Troy World War II and brought up a great article from the Norwalk newspaper, lays everything out about this particular mission. But we were just looking at it with Mike over here. It's got some nice coils, what used to be nice coils and capacity. You could see from the impact of the bomber going in the damage it did to it. And we assume it looks like it probably was an antenna tuning device, a high-powered antenna tuner. Maybe the ARC-13 fed into it or whatever. But anyway, that's about all I have. Feel free to look at it and remember Martin Troy. And his grave is actually here over in Arlington. You can go visit his grave if you'd like to. 22 years old, and I talked to someone, they used to call him Pops. Think about that, too. He was the old guy on the crew. Amazing. Look at today's 22 years old. Yikes. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, is there another volunteer?
Hello. Good evening. I'm Chris DiCarlo, KN4WLC, I think. But I usually don't get on the radio, so. But I brought some show and tell. I think it's a great idea. This has just been very enjoyable. First off, I own Fairfax Propane, kind of just as a background. And I have a place in Vienna where we cut stone, which has kind of led me to get a patent for, basically, I call it a laser tunnel to model pitched baseballs. So you could 3D model a pitcher and see how much his ball curves. So I'm working on the project. I've done the engineering for it, and I'm trying to build it in Vienna. But these are just some of the components for something different. So these are industrial lasers, and so basically it'd be a 55-foot tunnel with steel grating on one side, and that'll shoot to lasers. The lasers will be on the grating. and it'll shoot to sensors on the other side. And then you'll have vertical lasers also. And so knowing the coordinates, and then you have to be able to collect the data regarding when the sensors are tripped, and then you can piece that all back together using software, using computer code to be able to model the. So hopefully in 6 months. And so that's kind of just some background. And then I brought this because I bought this machine. This is a stripper, wire stripper. Because I'm going to need a lot of jumpers for the sensors. And so I had bought this machine. I also bought a crimper, but I didn't bring that, where you could take 2 of these and create an industrial crimp automatically. But I thought you guys, I'll run this, and it's just the neatest little thing. It took me about half a day to figure out how to get it to work, but it is just the neatest thing because it will spit these wires out, and you can vary wire thickness, whatever configuration. If you want to run wiring harnesses for cars, this is the device to make the wires. So anyway, that's it. Thank you. Yes. Or Vienna.
Okay, thanks. Someone else who would like to get up and show or tell? No? Okay, well, I guess it's my turn then. What I brought is an antique. This is an electronic keyer that was put on the market in 1960. It uses vacuum tubes and not transistors and integrated circuits. So this pup was invented by a ham whose call sign was W9TO, and it was known as a T.O.Keyer. Hallicrafters put it into production, almost the very same circuit. And it's a really clever looking thing. It has 6 tubes in it, of which 4 are 12 AU7s, which you all know are dual triodes. And so that really means 10. And it has a neon light in the front that goes off when you key it. Figured that out. But it works pretty well. And can everyone hear that? Is that too slow or fast? No? Well, if I make it any slower, half the people in here will go to sleep. But so anyway, I'm gonna send a little message to the group. So bear with me, please. The Army Navy game is tomorrow. So what did I send? Navy. Yeah. Okay, well, if you want to try it out after we're done, come on up here and I'll set it up for you.
Is it iambic?
It's not iambic. It's not iambic. And that's why it took me so long, so much practice to be able to use it like I've done without making any mistakes. For one. Anyway, so give it a try. Those of you who are used to iambic heaters, come up and give this one a try. Dean, thank you.
Awesome. Big round of applause and bravo Zulu to Mike. Thank you so much. And for everybody that brought their show and tell, really wonderful. Again, thanks to Stephen for arranging the food. We have the room for another half hour. Show and tell people will probably be up here if you have questions. Please bust your own dishes and clean your own stuff and take your leftover food and materials home so that Stephen isn't left with all of it. But with that, 73s everybody, and you all have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you at our first meeting in January.